Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's stories range from surviving a psycho ex, being stalked by a psychopath, and getting out of a dangerous situation that you put yourself in. This video is my 500th video on this channel, so please hit that like button to help it out a little bit. Unless you hate it, then give it a thumbs down. All ads are after the first 3 stories, that way you can relax and drift off afterwards. On to the stories. So a few days ago, I was outside my workplace, unlocking the ice thing to get a couple bags for a customer. A man rode up on his bike and stopped a few feet away from me. He said, "What's up?" I had a lot to get done that day, so I didn't even glance at him and just said, "Nothing, working." As I was rustling around in the freezer getting ice, he was talking, and once I pulled the ice out, I heard him saying, "Dead bitch." I was hopeful that he was just mumbling to himself or something, gave the bags to the customer, and as I turned back towards the store, he continued, "I'm gonna tie you up and fucking kill you. Get ready to die, cause we're gonna shoot the fuck out of you. I'm gonna kill you the next time I see you." That was all I heard because I went back into the store and called 911. I hear a lot of random threats at work, but this guy got to me. My heart felt like it was gonna shoot out of my chest. I could hear it beating. The cops are at our store for shoplifters multiple times a day, and since I didn't see a weapon, they were in no hurry to get back. From speaking to them earlier, I know that they had been dealing with a lot that day. Too many people getting all kinds of intoxicated on 420, I suppose. About an hour later, with me keeping an eye on the entrance and cameras the whole time, they showed up to take a report. One of the regular panhandlers who hangs outside and heard the man popped in and said, "He's across the street." They immediately went and arrested him. After having me confirm his identity with him facing away from me, I said I did want to press charges, made my statement, and was told that he'll get a court date and that maybe I will have to appear. I can also file an order of protection, which is nice and all, but I feel like someone who randomly threats people wouldn't care about that. He knows where I work, most likely that I'm the one that called about him. Now I'm worried about walking home at night, or any time really, in a neighborhood that I've been my whole life. Let's not meet again, guy. This happened to me and my boyfriend about 2 years ago. We live in a city that has a main downtown area. The city is pretty liberal, but once you get out into the country, it becomes quite the opposite. That being said, the main city and especially the downtown area has a pretty bad homeless problem that has only gotten worse over the years. For the most part, the homeless population is pretty harmless. They know the good spots to hang out. A lot of the time, they just smile at you, and I always smile back, and you go on your way. Sadly, there has been an increase of incidents in the last few years with the rise of overdose and addictive street drugs. I was living in the main downtown area at the time, having recently graduated college and wanting to be close to the nightlife. My best friend that I met in college and I were roommates. We had an apartment right in the middle of downtown. It was a perfect setup. My boyfriend, let's call him Jack, happened to live 1 block down, and then about 5 or 6 blocks south of that. It was about a 10-minute walk, give or take. It was even closer to the heart of downtown as well, so you can imagine how convenient that made it to hang out and not having to take a car and worry about parking. One overcast Sunday morning, my boyfriend and I woke up at my place and decided to walk over to his so that he could grab some things. We had walked the majority of the way. It really was just a straight walk on sidewalks the whole time. We were on the right side of the road, with the street to our left. We're not 1 minute away from my boyfriend's place when I notice someone ahead that makes me feel a bit uneasy. First off, the guy was walking in front of us in the same direction as we were, with his back to us. I could see he has both earbuds in. He was walking about the same pace, so we weren't about to run into him or anything. In front of him, facing and walking towards all of us, is a different guy. He had a small frame, maybe 5'8", wearing dark pants, a red sweatshirt with the hood up, and a backpack. Even though his hood was up, I could see his face. Some short black hair poked out, pale skin, and these black, beady, crazy eyes that I'll never forget. I assumed him to be homeless, as it was an area popular for them. Now, he wasn't looking at us, but rather the pedestrian with earbuds in, who happened to be closer to him and in front of us. All of a sudden, I see the homeless guy run and quite literally rush the pedestrian in front of us. Like, ran up and then stopped about a half a foot from the poor dude's face. Since the guy had his headphones in, he probably just wanted to mind his own business and walk home quietly. He was clearly taken by surprise and stopped and took one of his earbuds out to see what the crazy dude wanted. Me, while I'm a risk taker, I don't like putting myself in the wrong place when I don't need to be. This freaked me out and I didn't want the guy to notice us and come at us next, so I stepped left off the sidewalk into the street. There's a pretty big lane for street parking and it was lined with parked cars, so I conveniently hid myself from view behind a car. As I continued walking, I heard the guy start yelling obscenities at the poor pedestrian. Things like, "I'm gonna run you over with a car. I'm gonna find you." Like I said, we were not 100 feet from the entrance of my boyfriend's apartment at this point, and after witnessing that, I just wanted to be inside. My boyfriend had continued walking on the sidewalk, and in an instant, I came back in view, and we turned right towards the apartment. Now, the apartment did have a main entrance from the street on the sidewalk, but my boyfriend had just moved in and didn't have the code for the front door yet. All he had was his fob to the parking garage that led to the stairwell into his place. We were using that at the time to get in. We walked up to the parking garage door and clicked the button, so it started to roll up. I hadn't looked behind me at this point. I knew I probably should have. But a lot of times, if you ignore the crazy people, for lack of better words, they will in turn not bother you. So I was kind of following that tactic at the moment. The garage door was open and we went inside. My boyfriend clicked the button to close it. We started the short walk to the door to the stairwell. The garage door was nearly closed. I don't know what prompted me to look back, but I did, and what I saw still gives me chills today. It was a homeless guy from the street. He was squeezing under the garage door while he still could. I remember the chill that ran down my spine as I locked eyes with him and yelled at my boyfriend, "Jack, he's following us." I'm not sure what I expected my boyfriend to do, but he pushed the door to the stairwell open and started running. That was the oh shit moment when I realized this guy had access inside, because the door to the stairwell didn't require a fob or have a lock. Me definitely not wanting to be closest to this guy, I took off running after my boyfriend. As I pushed the door open and got inside the stairwell, I could hear the guy behind me doing the same thing as it was swinging back closed. I looked back and locked eyes with the crazy guy once again, and about shit myself as I realized my only option was to keep running and try to make it inside the apartment and close the door before he got there. Yeah, this guy was smaller, but what really freaked me out is since he had a backpack, I had no idea if he had a knife or gun in there. I mean shit, why else would you chase two people and outnumber yourself? My boyfriend lived on the 3rd floor, of course, so we proceeded to sprint up 3 flights of stairs. I could hear this guy's pounding footsteps behind me. At last, we were at our level and opened the door to the hallway and sprinted to his unit, and without looking back, unlocked the door as fast as we could. Still felt slower than hell to this day. We slammed the door shut behind us. I remember looking through the peephole and expecting to see the guy standing there, ready to yell at us. But nothing. My heart was pounding. I mean, what the fuck just happened? We called the cops and told them what happened to us. I'll admit they probably did all they could, but I didn't feel like it was enough. I was freaked out. This dude now had access and was inside the building with access to all the apartments and residents. I kept imagining him hiding in the stairwell for the next poor soul. Well, the cops came, drove around the perimeter of the complex for a few minutes, weren't able to search inside of the building because apparently they don't have access in and we're not allowed to let them in. They left not finding anyone. It took me forever to get the urge to finally leave the apartment to go run our Sunday errands, but we did. I'm sure the guy was high on drugs and decided to be crazy that morning and bother some unlucky people. He probably left after he realized he was screwed if people found him there and someone else called the cops. When I first got out of the army, I was in a relationship with this guy in 3rd Ranger Battalion. Let's call him Jim. Jim Reedus. He and I had an apartment together, and I thought I loved him, so instead of going back to my home in Nebraska, I stayed in Columbus, Georgia. Our relationship started out with him being what I thought was protective over me. Even though I was very attractive at the time, I had a very low self-esteem because of an assault I experienced when I was living in the barracks and the bullying I endured afterwards. Things moved very quickly. In fact, we were inseparable from the night we met. Anytime another man looked at me, he would get very confrontational towards the guy. I felt safe and protected by this. It made me feel special. I thought he must really value me if he would get upset by a guy looking my way. At first. Soon later, when we would be out at a bar, he would get hammered every time and act very nasty towards me if he thought I was looking at another guy. This would cause bitter fights, and I would always end up in a fetal position in bed, sobbing. But still, I stayed. The next day, he would always apologize, making excuses about it being because he was so drunk. But then he would proceed to explain to me why what I had done was wrong. It wasn't long before I felt myself isolated from all my friends and family because he was so insecure he made me take all my phone calls on speakerphone. My family begged me to leave, but I was afraid I couldn't get by on my own. Then one night, when he came home from the bar in his usual fashion, him screaming in my face and me sobbing, I told him I was going to get a room in a motel, and he lost his freaking mind. He yanked the keys out of the ignition and threw them in a wood line. He then got out of my car and proceeded to kick in the front quarter panel of my car. He used so much force that the hinges to my passenger door were bent. I told my insurance company that it was a hit and run, or I would have never been able to get the damages fixed. He screamed at me to get inside the apartment, but I couldn't unlock the door without my keys, which he blamed me for. He then grabbed me and started shoving me into the door, first by my shoulder, then with his hands around my throat, screaming, "Can't you see how much I love you?" I rasped, No, I can't." He let go and I fell to the ground in a heap. That night, I finally had enough. I was finally so angry that I didn't feel afraid anymore. That morning, while he was sleeping it off, I began to make plans. I started by telling him he had to leave and move back to the barracks. When he refused, I had to get his chain of command involved to make him leave and go back to the barracks, someone's couch, in the street, just as long as it wasn't with me. He stalked me mercilessly. I filed for an OP, but he bullied me into dropping it. I knew I would never be free from him if I stayed. So my parents sent me some money via Western Union, and I rented a Penske truck and a trailer and got help from my neighbor guy friend to load it up as soon as the sun set and brought it out from where I had hidden it. My best chance was to leave under the cover of darkness. I was really sick that night. I was running a fever of 103, but I knew it had to be then. It couldn't wait. I just told myself that I just had to get out of the city limits, then I could pull over and sleep a little bit. I figured that I would just drive as much as I could, and then rest when I couldn't push it any harder. I put my puppy in the cab in the truck with me, towed my car behind the truck, and left. I don't know how, except through divine intervention, but I somehow managed to drive nonstop from Fort Benning, Georgia, to my parents' home in rural Nebraska. I stopped only for fuel, at which time I would feed, water, and walk my little dog, Scruffy, use the facilities, and get what food and drink I could afford on my meager budget. I drove 14 hours and pulled into my parents' drive around 10 a.m. Central. I crashed on their old couch and slept for nearly 24 hours straight. I still hoped for nothing but pain and suffering for him. He turned me into pills, then coke, then crack, all while he was on active duty. He was a scumbag of a soldier and a man. He reached out to me on social media a couple years ago. I told him what a piece of steaming shit he was and told him to rot in hell. It felt amazing, even after all those years, to say this to him, and him be the one stammering. I'm actually glad he reached out to me and gave me the opportunity to verbally rip him into shreds. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Jim. So let's not ever meet again. I'm a 29-year-old male. I was out partying this Friday night with 4 of my female friends, 2 of which I had just met that evening. We were having drinks at a club in Central Europe. The night was going great. We were dancing, talking, all of us had fun. At about 2 a.m., the girls grabbed a taxi and went home. I stayed a bit more in the club to finish my drink. I had danced on the stage for about 20 minutes, then I grabbed a taxi and went home. When I arrived on the street where I live, my drunk ass realized that I have no keys and couldn't get in, as I live alone. I called another taxi and went back to the club to look for my keys. First, I went to the bar to see if anyone had brought any lost keys to them. Unfortunately, they didn't have my keys, so I started to look for them in the club in every place that I was that night. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and had been looking for my keys in the mass of people. About 10 minutes goes by, and I haven't found anything apart from broken glass and cigarette butts. I went back to the place where I initially was looking for them. This is the place where I was having the drinks with the girls. I started looking for my keys on the sitting benches instead of the ground. I had my keys in the inside pocket of my jacket as I always do, and my jacket was placed on the corner of the bench the whole night before I left. People were sitting on the benches, and they had their jackets on the benches too. I sat down near the corner where I was sitting before, and beside me was a guy with lines of drugs on his phone, freely giving them to other people. He had put his jacket on the corner of the bench, and I wanted to look at that corner to see if my keys had been pushed off the corner or something. So I grabbed his jacket, and to my surprise, my keys were right under his jacket, in the middle of the bench. I was so happy to find my keys. I was drunk and pretty much started yelling how happy I was to find my keys, as I was getting fucking desperate at the moment. There was a guy on the bench that I had met with the girls before in the club. I'll call him L. He was nice during the whole night, so I kept talking to L when I found my keys. I even went to the bar and grabbed another beer just to talk to him for a bit. I went to the toilet to have a pee, and when I came back, L had found himself an acquaintance to which he was talking to. So I just finished my beer while I smoked a cigarette and got ready to go home. This is when the guy that had lines of drugs on his phone started talking to me. I would call him Pedro, as it was definitely a fake name that he gave me. I was talking to him in English. Pedro was 19 years old, and he was from Colombia. He told me stories of his life in Colombia and how his family struggled. He told me that his father died recently, and he is the oldest son, so he's in Slovakia trying to make some money for his family. He even showed me photos of him and his family back in Colombia. I sympathized with Pedro and was feeling sorry for him. After about 20 minutes, El scored with a girl that he had met, and he said that they were going home. He asked Pedro if he has any MDMA on him, and Pedro sold him some. People around the bench had seen what was happening, so they wanted to get some drugs from Pedro. So he started to make lines on his phone. I told Pedro I'm going home and wished him best of luck, grabbed my jacket and started walking. This is when Pedro called out to me and stopped me, said that it's late and that he should go back to his hotel too. He scratched the drugs from his phone onto the table, took his belongings, and told the people that they could finish whatever was left for free. Pedro and I walked out of the underground club. When we were outside, he asked me if I could walk him to his hotel, which was nearby, a 5-minute walk. He told me in the club that he has no friends, no family in Slovakia. I really sympathized for him. I told him sure, I can walk you to the hotel. We were talking the whole walk, and he was saying real nice things to me, like how I get his situation and how good of a person I am. When we arrived at the hotel, the door was closed, and he messaged someone to come open the door for him. He asked if I wanted to have one last beer with him, to which I said sure, but I'll be on my way as soon as I finish the beer. Some girl came and opened the door for us. They had spoken Spanish as they greeted us. The hotel itself didn't really look like a public hotel. There was a reception and stairs up, and on the left was the dining room. Pedro told me to wait for him in the dining room. This was like 5 a.m. already. I went into the dining room and there was a girl sitting with her laptop. I greeted her with "Hola" and sat down. Pedro came after about 3 to 5 minutes with 2 open cans of some beverage. There was a parrot and a Jack Daniels logo. The can was a gold color, I think. This is the moment that I should have been suspicious and not drink from an open can. My naive drunk ass overlooked the fact that I have to drink from the can. I was talking to Pedro about drug cartels in Colombia and how their politics are fucked up. After about 10 minutes, I started feeling weird and looked over at my phone. My hands and eyes were tingling. I was quickly aware of what was happening now. I turned on the location and mobile data on my phone and put the phone in a different pocket than I had all night. Pedro started asking me how I was feeling, to which my adrenaline levels blow up. I started to think that I'm being abducted by some Colombian human trafficking ring. My sight started to weirdly tingle and the lights were blinding me. My jaw was messed up, as if I was pushing my teeth together. I have taken drugs in the past, and this felt like a stimulant and a disassociative, which was really weird for me to understand. I tried to keep my voice calm and mind present. I told Pedro that I know what was going on and asked why he gave me the stimulant, if he was trying to make me unconscious. Pedro's hand started to shake and he didn't answer me. The girl on the laptop looked right into my eyes, the first time she even moved her body. Pedro grabbed his phone and started to write down something on WhatsApp. I tried to convince Pedro that they made a mistake with the dose and that I was fine, apart from knowing that they had drugged me. I think that Pedro had drugged me in the club while I went to the toilet, which is why he quickly got up when I was leaving. Everything I said, Pedro rewrote to someone else, and he was waiting for incoming messages before saying anything to me. I started to talk to the girl too, told her that I don't give a fuck about what they're doing there, but I'm walking out. At that moment, I remember saying that I get what Pedro's doing, but I don't get what the girl's part of this was, to which I pointed a finger at her. Pedro got a notification on his phone, and he told me that he was sorry and I can go home if I want. I didn't respond to him. I got my drugged ass up and I was walking out of the dining room. I stopped by the girl with her laptop, stared right into her eyes, and I held my right hand up in a fist bump. She looked me in the eyes, gave me a fist bump, and did a weird grimace with her face. I walked to the door at the reception, which was closed. I started to kick and punch the door while yelling, "Open the fucking door!" The receptionist did, and I walked out. My heart was pumping, my whole body was shaking. I was feeling both dizzy and awake. I ran to the main street and I was calling my mom to come get me as fast as possible, but I didn't know where I was. I was feeling disassociated and I couldn't really apprehend what just happened. As I got to the main street where a bus stop was, I started feeling very paranoid. There was a white Mercedes SUV that stopped right at the main road near the bus stop that I stood at. They turned off the car lights and were just sitting there. I told all of this to my mom, and she told me to look for a camera. I found one and stood right under the camera, which was at the bus stop, to make sure that I'm being seen. I was feeling and talking weirdly, to which my mom told me to talk to her, to tell her what I could see around me. I had seen a few people that walked down the main street. Everyone was on their phone and occasionally looking at me. One guy came close to the bus stop and I approached him while I still was on the phone with my mom. I asked him what does he want from me, and he was like, "I'm sorry, do I know you?" To which I said that I'm sorry. After about 10 minutes of me being on the phone with my mom, the white SUV turned the engine on and left. My mom came by car soon after. I was walking to her car on the road, but I couldn't walk properly. I felt paranoid, tons of adrenaline going through my body. My heart was pumping so fast that I thought I was going to have some kind of seizure. I managed to get to my mom's car. She was in her pajamas, very scared. I started to tell her everything that happened. I told her to drive around the city instead of driving me straight home, just in case they were following us. We were driving around for maybe an hour, talking about what happened during that night, how the inside of the building looked and all. My jaw was going so crazy that my mom could hear it, and she was really scared for me. The whole ride I was feeling really weird. At one point, I felt like my soul left my body. I can't really describe it. I didn't feel like myself. Like I'm not real. Lights were blinding me and my vision was blurred and tingly, like my eyes were going up and down all the time. I did not feel any rushes of euphoria or anything. I thought that they gave me some mix of drugs. I arrived at my home around 7:30 a.m. My mom stayed home with me, comforting me. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. We were talking about going to the police and also if I was in any kind of danger anymore. At around 11 a.m., I fell asleep. During this time, my mom cleaned my apartment and my sister came to visit me. I don't know what I would do without my family. One of my girlfriends that was with me during that night came to visit me. As I talked to her, I thought I got some kind of episode, like schizophrenic or something. Why the hell would I be a target of something like this? I'm a chubby bearded guy. Why would they want to abduct me? I'm afraid of going to the police as our police department and politics are corrupt. And as long as I can remember, they've always been tied to mafia. They would take my testimony, start to investigate, and probably be stopped by their officials. I still don't fully believe that what happened to me was an experience with a human trafficking ring. However, there's so many red flags that make it seem like it. Like, why was Pedro scared after I called him out? Why wouldn't he talk to me unless someone sent him a message on his phone? Why would he even start to message someone during our conversation? Why the fuck would he drug me without me knowing it? But ultimately, why the fuck would they let me go? So Pedro and the two girls from the weird hotel, and possibly the Colombian human trafficking ring, let's fucking not meet again. Update. I went to the ER with my mom as I woke up with spasms all over my body. They gave me an IV and sent a sample of my blood for a toxicology report. They did some tests, EKG and blood pressure, and they sent me home approximately 3 hours ago. There are traces of acetylfentanyl, methylphenidate, and ketamine in my blood. Also, while I was being given an IV, the doctor said to my mom that this is not uncommon, that they have had lots of patients who have been unknowingly drugged during the last few years. He said that it wasn't common before. I was just a sophomore in high school and I fell head over heels for this new quiet kid and thought that he was my forever. Crazy, but I would actually go on to marry down the road just 1 week after graduation. High school sweethearts. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I noticed, but ignored because I was young and eagerly wanting to be a grown-up. Fast forward, the night before my wedding, I was going over last-minute wedding details with my mom, who is easily one of the most caring and selfless people I know. So bless my sweet mama's heart when I asked her if she would be mad if I decided that I didn't want to go through with a wedding. But me being me, my mom thought I was messing with her. I couldn't tell her the truth what was going on now. So I took a deep breath and forced out a believable chuckle. She generally thought it was just one of my jokes. I went on to finally tell her the truth almost a year after I escaped him, and she still feels bad for not taking it seriously. No one knew what was going on behind closed doors, but makes sense. I honestly was his biggest PR team. Only 2 hours had passed since saying I do's, and he was throwing me out of his truck in my parents' driveway, cussing and yelling at me that he wanted a divorce, recklessly driving off. So much for the honeymoon phase on our actual honeymoon. I ran inside and my dad came out of the bedroom and he couldn't understand a word I was saying, but he was basically trying to ask me what was happening. I say it as loud and clear as I could, while uncontrollably sobbing. He left me. How could he, on our honeymoon? My dad is pissed, but then tries to relax, like maybe he forgot something, pulling a bad joke, or something like that. Then we see his truck flying into our driveway and my dad smiles and says, "See, he's right there." I wipe my tears and walk out the door and tell him, yes, it was a prank. Inside, I was screaming. I was so embarrassed for myself because now I look crazy. But if I wanted to save this relationship, they could never know the truth. Months go by and he starts being sweeter ever since we had to be long distance because he was in the military at training. But soon, I would be packing up my life and moving to Texas with him. I could tell that my parents started seeing the cracks that I worked so hard to glue together. My mom even picked up my phone on the table, mistaking it for hers, and saw a huge message from him and just started crying, begging me to stay because he was not a good person. But I assured her that this was way out of character for him, a lie, and that he was just lonely. I knew she didn't believe me, but she also knew that I was stubborn and was going to do whatever, regardless of her concerns. After just a few weeks in Texas, I knew my life was in danger. It was Thanksgiving Day and my family just called to check on us and tell us Happy Thanksgiving. And at the moment I hung up, the man I thought was my soulmate started cursing at me and saying that I need to stop talking to my family because he's my family now. I let out a little chuckle, thinking that he's got to be joking, and he picks up our wedding glasses and throws them directly at me, shattering all around me. Shocked, I didn't know what to do, so I walked over with a broom to start sweeping up the broken glass. You may be reading this and think surely he was done throwing a tantrum by now, but no. He then throws picture frames at me while I'm sweeping up the glass. Honestly, that broken glass on the wood floor was just a metaphor for any love I had left towards that man. I broke that night. I stopped seeing him as my other half and more of a monster that I'm now stuck with. I became very depressed, and he loved that. He would break me down over and over again just to get a reaction. 2 months go by, and one night he completely lost his shit over the washer and dryer people messing up the days that they were supposed to come out, and he started pacing back and forth, mumbling words that I couldn't quite make out, but demanded that I call and fix it. He grabbed me and sat me on the couch telling me what to say, and that I better not fuck it up, like a damn negotiation. This man was paranoid as fuck, making comments that they were doing it because he was a soldier. Then he started blaming me, even though I wasn't around him when he called in the first place. But he still yelled at me for hours until he walked into the bedroom. I'm on the couch still, processing this fucking moment. He said, "You're so fucking stupid. This is your fault. Did you plan this with the workers just to make me look dumb? Or are you really just as fucking dumb? Huh? You fucking bitch? That's why I fucking thought you no good fucking ungrateful bitch." "You know what? I'm done," I replied. "You won't do anything except complain and bitch at me, blaming me for everything. All you do is cuss and yell at me for no damn reason." He looked at me with this look I've only heard other victims try to describe the best that they could describe it. A darkness in his eyes, like an emptiness that still causes me nightmares to this day. Without hesitation, he lunges at me in the middle of the day with our curtains open, door wide open, neighbors out and about. He throws me against the wall and starts choking me. I slowly see black, but he lets go only for a second because then he slammed my entire body on the floor. At the moment, I either blacked out or my brain was trying to shield myself from what was happening. But piece by piece I would come to, and he was holding me by my shoulders and just repeatedly slamming me on the wood floor. My screams were ignored by people outside. I pleaded for anyone to call the police and repeated yelling for help over and over. My fight or flight takes over and chooses flight. I ran to the main bathroom and locked the door, frantically calling my mom because, in the moment, I just wanted to hear her voice, unsure if it would be my last time. But my poor mom didn't know the nightmare of the phone call until it was too late. She was with my sister and my dad, and she put me on speakerphone, because they usually do this so they all can talk to me. But instead, they hear me screaming for my life and hear my ex calling me awful names and telling me to get my ass out there and unlock the door. They were confused, and my dad was ready to come and kill this asshole himself. But then silence. No more banging, just me softly crying. And just to calm my mother over the phone that I'm alright and I know that I need to leave him. But I had to do it in the safest possible way because if he were to catch me, I may not make it out with my life. When I walked out of the room, my ex was just sitting there with a blank stare, like nothing happened. This was the theme throughout our 3-year relationship, but I could no longer ignore the escalation of his behavior. So one night, I put my escape plan into action. I was gonna make a run for it. It was 2 a.m. Keys to my Pontiac were on the kitchen table, and he was asleep in the bedroom that I wasn't allowed in. I busted out of the guest bedroom that was my prison and beelined it to the front door as quickly as I could. 9.5 hours to my home state, only stopped in Dallas to fill up for gas. With every mile I put in the rearview mirror, I felt something inside reassure me. I'm free now. Forever scarred, but most have healed or faded. 100% believe had I stayed, I'd be 6 feet deep. So to my abusive ex-husband that I fled from that late February night, let's not meet again ever. For a little bit of background, I'm a 24-year-old female who loves scary stories, horror movies, true crime, etc. It takes a lot to scare me, though I haven't actually experienced many terrifying, life-threatening events, fortunately. On to the story. This was during the middle of August in North Texas, summer of 2023. So the nighttime temperatures were around 100 degrees. My dad and one of my brothers, who's 11, drove about an hour north into the countryside to go stargazing for my brother's scout merit badge. There are some twisty gravel roads in the forest as you approach Black Creek Lake. We got to see a coyote, a deer, and 2 raccoons. We live in a city, so we don't often see such animals. We thought that would be the excitement for our night. We finally made it to the recreational park grounds beside the lake. The layout is simple. If you're standing in the round parking lot, then the campgrounds are to the northwest, the lake is south, and the path in and out is to the east of us. There are no official campgrounds to the east of this area, which is important later. We got there around 10 p.m. and we set up. We were able to successfully see some stars through the telescope, as well as Saturn, which was exciting for us. Throughout this whole time though, there were 2 parties, or what might have been a group of people in the parking lot and surrounding area. One party was kayaking, and then later fishing from the boat ramp area west of us. To the north in the lot were 2 cars. From that direction we were constantly hearing a loud, irritating voice of a woman who was obviously in a bad mood and didn't want to be there. She continuously cursed at someone, or no one in particular, and at one point was mad at someone for taking her keys and obstructing her from driving, which obviously made it sound like she was drunk or under some other influence. At one point in the night, around 11 p.m., we hear someone loudly, sporadically honk one of the car horns over and over again in random patterns. Then we hear the obnoxious woman rudely tell someone to wake up over and over again, then proceeded to hold down the horn for a few seconds at a time, and continuing her assault on the horn and our ears. By this point, my family and I are just about ready to leave due to the loud commotion. I personally was fixing to go over there myself and tell her off, but I knew that probably wasn't a good idea. I definitely didn't want to put myself and my unborn baby in any danger. Then for about 20 to 30 minutes, we were able to watch the stars in relative peace, with little noise coming from the other 2 parties. Fortunately, none of these people were directly involved with what happened next, but it may have been the cause of it. Just before midnight, we packed up our stargazing stuff and got in the car. Now, the gravel path to the exit is up a slight hill or slope, meaning from the parking lot you can't see past where the path goes up and around a couple trees. We drive up the hill, and just as our headlights are coming back down to illuminate the path in front of us and the trees to our right side, It was right then and there that we see a man wearing only black shorts and no shirt. The timing was straight out of a horror movie to just suddenly see someone out of nowhere. He was in his late 20s or early 30s and had short, dark hair. Just as the light hit him, he was standing and walking right there, just to the right of our car, in front of us, a very close distance, only a couple feet away. The guy had been walking towards our direction, and upon seeing us, quickly rose both of his arms up to flip us off with both hands. He kept his hands and arms raised, and quickly and loudly said something to us with anger, or something in his voice. We couldn't understand what he was saying since we had the radio on, and all of it happened so quickly. The second the man saw us, he started walking towards our car faster. My dad was driving slowly initially to avoid the agitated man, thinking he may need help. My dad, in a confused voice, says, "What is he doing?" But I just replied with, "Nope, go, go, go," and we sped off. I knew this was not the situation where we needed to stick around and ask questions. It freaked me out a little bit, imagining what would have happened if this guy would have reached our car a few seconds later if we had not sped off. I'm not very familiar with my dad's car, and it scares me that I might have ended up pressing the wrong buttons to lock my door, and the guy could have just opened it and done who knows what. We left and never had anything else happen, but we wonder who this guy was and where he came from. The direction he was walking from had no official campgrounds, only the forest. Maybe he lived in one of the scattered houses in the woods we passed by on our long journey. I wonder why he had been walking in our direction towards the recreational area. My best theory is he wanted to confront the group that had been honking the horn and waking up the entire forest. But upon seeing our car leave, maybe he thought it had been us making the racket. Even if that's not it, or the man needed help, which is not likely considering his reaction to us, I couldn't help but feel a sense of danger. I hope that no harm came to those other two parties that night. I don't know exactly where to start, but years after this incident, I had flashbacks with all the details while talking to my girlfriend on the phone and telling each other about our memories. After hours of reading people's memories on Reddit, I have something to share, and I can't wait to see your reaction. This happened at the beginning of 2023. I'm a male, 22 at the time. I was working as a terminal agent at one of the biggest airports in Europe. My job description was mostly to give directions to arriving and departing passengers in this airport as big as the city, to solve their problems, to solve visa and passport related problems. For some reason, I can't tell you exactly which airport it is, but you can probably guess from the details I will give. Since this airport is in a really huge and very key location, it is one of the transfer points for passengers coming and going from Asia, Africa, Europe, and America. So it was in the nature of my job to encounter very strange types of people and events. I was working 12-hour shifts, some nights and some days. Working is determined by daily assignments. This incident happened during my 12-hour night shift on the transfer floor of the airport, the common point where international passengers wait for passport control before picking up their luggage, and where passengers of all incoming international flights flow. When we work, we're supposed to wait at a fixed point when passengers don't specifically call for us, but it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and since flights and passenger traffic had slowed down, I decided to patrol around a bit. I left my station and went to the gate of the only arriving flight at that time of night. I decided to wait there in case passengers needed help when the gate opened. After a while, the plane pulled up to the gate. The gate opened, and a lot of normal-looking people walked out and into the transfer center. Except that woman. That strange-looking woman who made me feel cursed by the cold July air. She was brunette in her late 20s, covered in dirt and torn clothes. Her hair was missing in some places, and the hair that was there was rather unkempt and I think a bit burnt. When she saw me in my uniform with unusually large pupils, she walked up to me, looking scared and confused. "Excuse me, do you work here? I need help." Damn it, of course you need help, I said to myself. I wanted to take her arm because she was having trouble walking, but the smell emanating from her made my nose hurt and I immediately abandoned the idea. Don't judge, it wasn't normal sweat smell, but it smelled like she was already dead. I sat her down on a seat reserved for passengers, and I stood opposite of her, asking her in a calm voice how I could help her. I had a very bad experience. That's why I'm running away from there. I haven't eaten in days, and I think there's something in the water that they gave us on the plane. Since I drank it, I don't feel well and my mind is fuzzy. I didn't find what she was saying very convincing. I thought she was having some kind of mental breakdown because her gestures and intonations when she spoke were very strange. But I was also familiar with the aviation rules, and I knew that something like this should be reported immediately to the police. When I told her this, she didn't like that idea. She stood up and shook me by my shoulders and shouted, "No police! Never the police!" Dude, she started laughing, looking up at the ceiling like there was something up there. This woman was making strange gestures with her hands, but her cheerful demeanor was broken by a sudden burst of crying. "No police. They won't like it." "They? The police? That's their job." "Who said anything about the cops? I'm talking about the people who did this to me." As she said this, she lifted up her burnt hair that had fallen from her forehead, and I saw the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. I've seen a lot of strange tattoos because of the environment I studied and lived in, but this was different. Right in the center of her forehead was a tattoo that looked like a barcode, like one you find on products in grocery stores, with serial numbers underneath. At first, I thought it was just a strange fashion sense for aesthetic purposes, but her strange behavior in some documentaries I've seen made me think that it was probably used by human traffickers to mark the people so they could be easily identified and caught when they escape. When she realized that I couldn't help her the way she wanted, she at least wanted to use my phone. I told her that she's not allowed to use my phone due to the airport security rules and that she could use a payphone if she wanted to. Of course, she didn't have any money with her, and I was not allowed to give her money. Since she showed aggressive behaviors towards me every time I insisted on talking to the police, I finally decided to do it secretly and brought her some food and water before going to the police. When I arrived at the police station on the transfer floor, the policemen were taking advantage of the calm night, resting. When I told them about what happened to me and pointed to the woman, they told me that it was just one of the refugees coming to our country, and that's why she was acting like that, because she wanted us to let her enter illegally. They didn't take it very seriously, and unfortunately, I had to leave without a solution. When I went back to the woman, I realized that she had not touched the food or water I had brought her, and repeatedly refused to consume them with fear in her eyes. I decided to have a conversation with the woman, so not to be too judgmental. When I asked her name, she gave me a very strange answer that I've never heard before. It was like a name from some ancient language, and even now I don't remember exactly what she said. When I asked her where she came from and where she was going, she said she didn't know. To get this information, I took her boarding pass and her passport from her hand. I don't remember exactly, but she was coming from an Asian country, and her next destination was not written on the boarding pass, so her ticket was only valid until here. I decided to end our conversation, which was not very productive, and leave her alone to observe her from a distance. I go back to my station for some paperwork and decide to take care of it in the meantime. Later that morning, around 6 a.m., my other colleague was due to arrive at the station to take my shift. I was going to exit the door where they were going to enter, and before I left, I decided to stop by again on my way to see this strange female visitor. When I went up to her, she was holding a book in her hand. It was a book with a very old cover and yellowed paper, but I didn't understand what was written in it until she pointed at me and called me over. Even then, I didn't understand it. It was a book written in alphabets I don't know, in a language I didn't know. I don't want you to think I'm making this up, but it was a book with strange figures of people and other drawings. This woman pointed to one of the drawings and said, "This is how they do this." "They do what like this?" I was confused. "Can you be a little bit more specific?" When I said that, she shook her head from side to side, laughing. She had an expression as if I wouldn't understand even if she explained it. I told her that a friend of mine would be arriving soon in my place, and if she had any problems or needed anything, she could contact them as she wished. I gave her directions to the restroom, where she could get some food, the police station, and the ticket office. After a few seconds of looking at my face, she thanked me in tears and took my hands with both of hers and looked at me in the eyes. I didn't know exactly what happened to her, but at that moment my heart broke and I put my hand over hers and nodded. It was time to leave when my friend, who was coming behind me to take my place, touched me, and I introduced them to the woman and secretly informed them about the situation. My friend told me that they were going to take special care of her. When I woke up the next day, I texted my friend and asked them how she was doing. They told me that after I introduced them to her, they left to take care of another passenger and that they never saw her again for the rest of the day. They said when they asked the passport police and ticket offices, they told them that they were busy enough as it is and that they don't pay much attention to people and brushed them off. I never saw this woman on my next shifts and I've never heard from her again. Still gives me goosebumps when I remember it. I would be interested in your comments on the incident. If there's anything I missed or you want to ask,